This is a very courageous woman. You'll see why in a moment. Hello, my friends.
Hi.
Oh, that's wonderful. You are my friend. That is true. I was originally addressing my audience, but Carol Swain, I love your response. This is one of my favorite people in the world on the line. She's a professor formerly at Vanderbilt and Princeton, and now at PragerU. Is that even fair to say at all?
I am. PragerU is one of the most important things I've done in my life, and I'm reaching millions of people that I could never have reached on those campuses.
Well, all right. We didn't rehearse this, folks. Carol Swain is a scholar. She is a courageous scholar, and she is just, she's become a friend of the family. Whenever she's in L.A., we get together. Carol Swain has made a third video for Prager University, and it is the Inconvenient Truth about the Republican Party that has, in 3 days, 3.3 million views. But I want to talk to you, Carol Swain. By the way, you're now at the James Madison Society at Princeton, correct?
No. Are you asking me about my email?
No. Are you now affiliated with Robbie George's?
I have a permanent affiliation as a scholar there in the James Madison program.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Okay, good.
Yes.
Just wanted to get all that correct. By the way, this is painful because it's so confining in some sense of who any of us is, but I think it's relevant in this case to note that Carol Swain is a black American and gives these videos which run counter to the liberal narrative of what a black is supposed to think, because that's a very powerful aspect of contemporary society, which is, shall I say, lamentable. You were asked by The Hill to write a piece on the Southern Poverty Law Center. Is that right?
Yes, back in November, I was recruited to write a piece, and I think the first draft was turned in around November, before Thanksgiving. And bottom line is, it's been checked by their attorneys. It's been, it's gone to the editorial board. It's been presented to the owner, but no one has accepted or rejected the article, and I think it's because it's so powerful. I give 7 reasons why the Southern Poverty Law Center is not a credible organization that should be allowed to have its representatives testify before Congress.
Wow. We have a video on the Southern Poverty Law Center I'm just letting my listeners know. The Southern Poverty Law Center is theoretically an anti-racist group. It monitors racist organizations. It raises hundreds of millions of dollars from paranoids in the United States and from those who just love to defame people on the right. Can you give examples of organizations or individuals they've called hate groups or hate individuals that are not?
I can start with myself. Back in 2009, they labeled me as an apologist for white supremacy because of a review I gave to a film that they felt that the filmmaker was a racist. And if you look at what they're doing now, they started out as a reputable organization back in the 70s. They were fighting the Klan and the neo-Nazis. Well, those groups sort of withered away. They had all this money on hand, and so they started going next after immigration restrictionists. Now they are targeting churches and organizations like the Family Research Council, Focus on the Family, churches like the James Kennedy Ministries, and a lot of mainstream organizations. Alliance Defending Freedom, Liberty Council. We can go down the list of mainstream organizations doing good work that have been labeled by the organization as hate groups.
Do they ever label something like Antifa on the left as a hate group?
No, not Antifa, not the Black Lives Matter, not the Muslim Brotherhood. We can go down the list of leftist groups that have not been labeled. And they have a few leftist groups like the New Black Panther Party that was extreme, that they label them as a hate group. But for the most part, the targets are always people that now, it's just people that disagree with them politically.
Right. Hold on there. We're gonna continue in a moment. All right, everybody. Professor Carol Swain is my guest. You can see her in the latest Prager University video. 3.3 million views in 3 days. The Inconvenient Truth About the Republican Party. And she was just asked, became known to me just today, my producer Alan Estrin told me, you, Carol Swain, were asked by The Hill to write a piece on the Southern Poverty Law Center, the alleged fighter against racist right-wing organizations. And then you wrote one, and have they said no? Have they said you should modify it? What have they said?
No, they have not rejected the article, and they have not published it. And if I were, I tend to be impatient, and so I'm tempted to take it elsewhere, but I would like for them to make a decision, because from my perspective, it seems as if they may be intimidated by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And we need our news agencies to be independent journalists, and especially with The Hill being in Washington, D.C., we need to reach that audience that on Capitol Hill so that they know that the Southern Poverty Law Center is not a credible organization, especially the Democrats.
John Stossel just did an expose on the Southern Poverty Law Center. He called it a hate organization.
I was the first person to call them a hate organization back in 2009 before they called me an apologist for white supremacy. I wrote a blog for the Huffington Post where I said that instead of monitoring hate groups, they had become one. And at that time, they were going after the immigration restrictionists. I believe that they are not an organization that should be influencing the laws that govern us. Therefore, they shouldn't be testifying before Congress.
They called you, a black woman, an apologist for white supremacy?
Yes. They told the author of The New White Nationalism in America, Its Challenge to Integration, they called me an apologist for white supremacy because of a film that I endorsed, that they said that the filmmaker, is or was a racist. All I knew was that I endorsed the film based on its content for classroom use because I thought it offered a perspective that students needed to hear.
What was the film?
It was called A Conversation About Race, and it gave the perspective of, of a white person that feels like he's being beaten up by allegations of racism that are unjustified. And I felt like there were so many classes on race where we hear one perspective that it would have been good for the students to debate and hear how some whites feel. And so that's why I was enthusiastic about the film.
It's like when I spoke at the University of Wyoming a couple of months ago, and left-wing protesters published a piece saying that I was an anti-Semite.
You, a Jew?
Yeah. They dropped it later because they realized how absurd it was. But what the hate groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, they just have a list of smears directed against people with whom they differ, and then they just pick some. And they don't bother to even check, well, is it really? I mean, is it likely that a black woman is is a brilliant professor, an intellectual, is really a defender of white supremacy, doesn't that even strike them as a bit absurd?
Well, under the Obama administration, the Southern Poverty Law Center was advising the Department of Homeland Security, and there's a new article in the Washington Beacon, and apparently the State Department has been given a grant to that organization for some work they're doing in Europe.
Oh, my God.
So our tax dollars are helping to support the Southern Poverty Law Center.
So are you waiting to hear back from the Hill, or it's pretty much dead?
I mean, some people would say that, no response is a response, but because of the circumstances, I feel like they owe it to me to reject the piece or accept it. And as soon as they reject it, if they plan to reject it, then I can take it elsewhere. But in the meantime, I'm not going to be the person that blinks first.
Before you go to the conservative media, if you have to, in fact, leave the Hill, at least with regard to this article, just a thought, you should try, for example, The Atlantic, which is on the left but fancies itself as a thoughtful journal.
That's great. Do you have contacts there?
Yeah, but they all attack me.
I will try.
That would be
an organization
anyway.
That's not, labeled clearly on the right, because otherwise I'm preaching to the choir.
That's correct. It's still important because of your prestige, but nevertheless, I would try elsewhere, and I think The Atlantic is every so often 1 out of 30 pieces will be surprising in its balance. So, anyway, it's part of the story that this black intellectual who's taught at Princeton and Vanderbilt is rejected because they're so scared of alienating the Southern Poverty Law Center. That would be a story in and of itself.
I know, and that's why I'm sharing it.
God bless you. Carol Swain can be seen in the latest Prager University video, The Inconvenient History of the Republican Party. God bless you, Carol.
Thank you, and please follow me on Facebook at Professor Carol M. Swain.
Professor Carol M. Swain at Facebook, absolutely.
That you are, 'cause it sure seems you got no doubt, but we all see you got your head in the clouds.
Hello, my friends. Reuters report, protesters angered by a, quote, racist, unquote. I'm surprised they put racist in quotes, to their credit. H&M, it's the second largest chain of stores, I think, in the world. It's a Swedish company. Advertisement, ransacked several of the Swedish fashion group's South African stores on Saturday. The economic freedom fighters, protesters, targeted 6 H&M stores in the Gauteng province, where South Africa's economic hub of Johannesburg is located, tearing down shop displays and throwing clothes around. H&M earlier this week issued an apology for the widely criticized ad, which featured, I saw the picture, it's as innocent a picture as you can imagine. Sweet little black kid wearing a, what is it, T-shirt? I don't think, is it a T-shirt? Yeah. Sweatshirt, that's what it is, yeah. Modeling a sweatshirt with the slogan, coolest monkey in the jungle, and said it had removed it from all its marketing. Now, I don't think it's known to Swedes, for example, that in the past, blacks have been insidiously compared with monkeys. So there would be no way that they would know. They were probably going out of their way to just do a fun thing with a black kid. Because virtually every parent of every race calls their kid monkeys at some point, especially if they have boys. That is the reason for the sweatshirt. But Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, spokesman for the ultra-left, I can't believe it. Reuters described something as ultra-left? If for Reuters to describe something as ultra-left, do you realize how left it must be? I'm surprised it's still on Earth.
Might not be.
Yeah. That said that was too little, too late. The time of apologies for racism are over. There must be consequences to anti-black racism, period, Ndlozi wrote on Twitter, posting pictures of a vandalized H&M store and video footage of chanting EFF supporters. Do you know what the left does more than the right? Chant. They obviously riot much more than the right, but they also chant more. Do you know right-wing or conservative chanters? Smaller government, smaller government. Ha 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 ha. I don't know. It's hard to imagine. All right, everybody. We'll post these articles at DennisPrager.com. We return in a few moments.
Racist, sexist, Republican, these words are virtually interchangeable, at least according to most professors, journalists, and celebrities. So are they right? Let's take a look at history. The Republican Party was created in 1854. The first Republican Party platform, adopted at the party's first national convention in 1856, promised to defeat, quote, those twin relics of barbarism, polygamy, and slavery. Those twin relics were spreading into the Western territories. Republicans feared that as those territories became states, polygamy and slavery might become permanent parts of American life. Polygamy, the marriage of one man to multiple women, devalued women and made them a kind of property. Slavery, of course, did the same to blacks, literally. The Democrats were so opposed to the Republicans and their anti-slavery stance that in 1860, just 6 weeks after the election of the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, South Carolina, a state dominated by Democrats, voted to secede from the Union. The Civil War that followed was the bloodiest war in U.S. history. It led to the passage by Republicans of the 13th Amendment, which freed the slaves, the 14th Amendment, which gave them citizenship, and the 15th Amendment, which gave them the vote. In 1870, the first black senator and the first black congressman were sworn in, both Republicans. In fact, every black representative in the House until 1935 was a Republican, and every black senator until 1979 was too. For that matter, the first female member of Congress was a Republican. The first Hispanic governor and senator were Republicans. The first Asian senator, you get the idea. Republicans also kept their pledge to defend women's rights. In 1862, the Morrill Anti-Bigamy Act was passed by the Republican-controlled Congress to put an end to polygamy. In 1920, after 52 years of Democratic Party opposition, the 19th Amendment was ratified thanks to the Republican Congress, which pressured Democratic President Woodrow Wilson to drop his opposition to women's rights. In the final tally, only 59% of House Democrats and 41% of Senate Democrats supported women's suffrage. That's compared to 91% of House Republicans and 82% of Senate Republicans. There certainly was a war on women, and it was led by the Democratic Party. But while Republicans had won a major battle for women's rights, the fight for black civil rights had a long way to go. In the 1920s, Republican President Calvin Coolidge declared that the rights of blacks are just as sacred as those of any other citizen. By contrast, when famed sprinter Jesse Owens, a staunch Republican, won 4 gold medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, He was snubbed by Democratic President Franklin Roosevelt. Roosevelt only invited white Olympians to the White House. 2 decades later, it was a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower, who sent the 101st Airborne Division to escort black students into Little Rock Central High when Arkansas Governor Orville Forbes, a Democrat, refused to honor a court order to integrate the state's public schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1960, which outlawed poll taxes and other racist measures meant to keep blacks from voting, was filibustered by 18 Democrats for 125 hours. Not one Republican senator opposed the bill. Its follow-up bill, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, is one of the landmark pieces of legislation in American history. That, too, survived a filibuster by Democrats thanks to overwhelming Republican support. But you might be thinking, all that's in the past. What have Republicans done for women and blacks lately? The answer you'd hear from professors, journalists, and celebrities is not much. And this time they'd be right. They'd be right because the Republican Party treats blacks and women as it treats everyone, as equals. The Democratic Party never has, and it still doesn't. Today's Democrats treat blacks and women as victims who aren't capable of succeeding on their own. The truth is, this is just a new kind of contempt. So there is a party with a long history of racism and sexism, but it ain't the Republicans. I'm Carol Swain for Prager University. Thanks for watching. To keep our videos free, click here.
Hello, everybody. Dennis Prager here. I'm going to go to my guest in just a couple of seconds, actually. Under 30 seconds. I just want to say to John in Libertyville, Illinois, if I don't get to you, call him, I hope to, where he counters what I had just spoken about, the left cultivating anger in women, in blacks, in gays, in Hispanics. The Republicans cultivate anger about illegal immigration. Anger about policies is not the same as anger at groups. I'll try to get to your call, but I didn't want to let that go. There's no comparison. Republicans are not angry at any racial, ethnic, religious, or other type of group. I have on the line Guy Benson, who is the political editor for townhall.com, and he is the presenter or teacher of the newest Prager University course, I'm Gay, Conservative, So What? So I heard you on Fox and Friends today, Guy. I thought you did, as usual, terrifically. So the thesis, for those who didn't get to see the video, is very simple. Just because I'm gay doesn't mean I am going to be on the left. On every value issue with the right, we agree. Is that a fair synopsis?
I would say most value issues.
Right. No, you're right. That's right. No, that's you. It's a good correction. I'm sorry. That's right, because you and I may not agree on same-sex marriage, for example.
Correct.
Right.
And that's fine.
Right.
And so, first, I did want to thank you for the opportunity to present at PragerU. I've watched Prager University videos in the past. I really enjoyed Alan Dershowitz on the legality of Israel's origins in the modern era. It was really, really good. I never fully understood the incredible reach of those videos. I mean, it was published yesterday morning on YouTube and Facebook, and the video has more than 1 million views already. I'm just blown away by that. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And really the reason that we chose this thesis was the constant need from some on the left, in even pleasant conversations with me, to effectively justify my existence. How is it possible that you can be a conservative person who's also gay? And to me, it's sort of self-evident. It's not very difficult to explain, and yet a lot of people are perplexed by it. So a 5-minute explanatory video about identity politics and why they're toxic seemed like a great opportunity to direct those questions to the same source repeatedly. And I have to tell you, Dennis, in the last 24 hours, I have heard from dozens, maybe even hundreds at this point, of right-leaning people in the LGBT community, Hispanics, blacks, women. People have contacted me on social media saying, thank you for explaining this succinctly, because I feel under siege sometimes from my friends, and this is a succinct, clear explanation of the dynamics that I feel in my heart. And that's really been quite rewarding.
There is a serious percentage of Americans, a guy who live as Marranos, and if you're not familiar with the term, don't be self-conscious. Most people are not, but I've explained it a number of times, and indeed in a piece published at Town Hall, and that is, this is the name given to Jews who practiced Judaism privately and in public were Catholic during the Spanish Inquisition, because in public, if they would be hurt if they appeared to be Jewish. And we have in America millions, I believe tens of millions of Marranos, among gays, among actors, among blacks, among Jews, who have to appear as either non-political or liberal, and in private are conservative. Those are the people who wrote to you. So we'll come back in a moment, because I'd love to get your reaction. Guy Benson gave, in this specific case, gays, but not just that, as he points out, blacks and Hispanics and women, permission to say, you know what, I'm not a leftist. You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, everybody. I'm talking to and with Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com. By the way, I do want to talk to you for a moment, but I want you to respond first to what I said earlier about Town Hall, which seems to be growing and increasing its clout. But that's just one man's opinion, but I'll tell you in some ways how I come to that. But anyway, this Marrano idea, you were telling me how touched you were by all the gays and blacks and women and Hispanics writing you. Thank you for giving a voice to what we also believe. So it's a special feeling because you kind of put yourself out there a little bit, especially in a video for Prager University that was as personal on some levels as this was. And I've gotten blowback from some people on the religious right, for example, and other people on the gay left. But it's worth it because I think I'm telling the truth, an important truth, and I'm helping empower other people who sometimes feel voiceless because of this suffocating tyranny of identity politics. And one of the things that I've heard, Dennis, from some people on the left is saying you're a hypocrite because you did an entire video decrying identity politics, but you're talking about your own identity to do it. And my response to that is, no, there's a big difference between talking about your identity and identity politics. Identity politics is the assumption that people ought to believe things or vote a certain way based on their identity. That does not preclude us from talking about our identity if we object to that general notion. That's a crucial distinction here. We can talk about who we are and be open about that without falling into this mentality where you're part of a group, you belong in a box, you're supposed to think certain things, and if you don't think those things, then in some way you're a traitor to your identity group. That's the pernicious lie that I'm really trying to get at and go after in the Prager University video. And part of that also is clarifying to some of my friends on the left who took umbrage at the video saying, well, you're saying that our priorities are wrong and your priorities are right. And I'm saying, actually, I'm not arguing that. You
can rank your own political priorities however you see fit. I might disagree with you on a bunch of issues, but I'm not here to tell you how you're supposed to shape your worldview. All I'm asking is reciprocation. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to do those things either. That's it. It's pretty simple.
Is there a term in the LGBT activist world for gays who leave the left like a black who does as an Uncle Tom?
I have been compared to sort of Nazi-enabling Jews on a few occasions.
That's precious.
It's pretty.
You're a nedge. You've been called a nedge, a Nazi-enabling Jew.
I've been called that. I've been called mentally ill. I've been called self-loathing. The list goes on. Voting against my own self-interest, ungrateful for my rights, all of it. And to me, it gets really tedious and boring having to respond to this endlessly, which is why we made the Prager University video to just.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how long it will take till YouTube puts it on the restricted list. I know. I predict under a week.
All right. Well, I hope that's not the case, but I understand that has been a struggle for you guys, which is mind-blowing. I mean, the stuff that is on YouTube that doesn't get taken down versus your thoughtful content that reaches millions of people, because there's clearly a deep hunger and appetite for this stuff, partially because I think mainstream academia has so many glaring blind spots that the market cries out for this type of material. It's really sad that YouTube apparently is targeting your content, which is thoughtful and fact-based, for censorship. It's pretty pathetic.
So tell me, on other matters, since quite correctly, this is not the only thing that defines you, to say the least. You're not. Yeah. You're the political editor of Town Hall because you're talented as being a political editor. Nobody asked you your sexual orientation, and as indeed is fitting. Do you? I have noticed a growth, but I may be wrong, and I don't want you to either say what I want to hear or even what you want to say, because you work at Town Hall. But what is happening there?
Well, I mean, it's an amazing place to work. I joined Town Hall in 2010, so I've been there for 7-8 years at this point, and we have an incredible stable of contributors and columnists like yourself. We also have a small, tight editorial team, including my colleague Katie Pavlich, who's a fellow Fox News contributor, and a whole group of us, Matt Vespa and Courtney O'Brien and Loretta Brown. It's a small, young group. Our boss is Jonathan Garthwaite, who's phenomenal. And the amount of growth between 2010 and today is extraordinary. I mean, it's not even close in terms of traffic. And that's not just because of me. You know, I like to think that I've been a small part of that, but the content that we are producing has gotten a lot of traction and a lot of attention. And, you know, we're looking at 25, 30-plus million clicks a month. That's based on some of the numbers that I saw from last year. I know early this year the numbers have been big again. So we're so appreciative of our audience. We cut sort of a broad swath across the center-right coalition of thought. We have some very, very conservative contributors. We have some more kind of right-of-center moderate folks as well, and we try to be a clearinghouse.
Well, you're doing a great job. You really are. Guy, it's a delight to be with you. And we'll obviously talk again, and thank you for the video, and thank you for your work at Town Hall. All right, you're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. I want to discuss the religious aspects of that the next hour, the Ultimate Issues Hour. It's a very important and very sensitive subject, but that's exactly why it needs to be discussed. Back in a moment. Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. And, all right, as I promised, John in Libertyville, Illinois. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call.
Not only did I take your call, I told you my response before I took your call.
I appreciate that.
That's really rare.
Your point Yeah, I'm honored. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your response was that conservatives don't cultivate a generalized anger; they cultivate anger over policy.
No, not general. They do cultivate generalized, but they don't cultivate anger at groups. Okay.
I'm sorry, should I continue?
Okay, there's nothing that I know of in conservative thought that whites should be angry at blacks, that men should be angry at women, that Americans should be angry at non-Americans, and so on. Which is the dominant theme of leftism, to be angry at groups.
Okay, well, my observation in response to that, and I can think of lots of examples of a much more generalized anger at groups on the part of the political right, but I'll identify one for the purposes of my comment. Both Trump's election and your show on a daily basis depend on a general, all-encompassing, utterly unnuanced anger towards a specific group that you call the mainstream media. It's actually journalism. But you wouldn't have a job, and Donald Trump wouldn't be in the White House if you did not cultivate anger at the mainstream media.
That's not true. Believe me, I would have a job. That's a silly comment. and I would have a job. All right, I would have this job. They don't care if I said every day, folks, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, I think the New York Times and CNN do a great job. My employers wouldn't even send me an email. It would be a non-issue. That's Dennis's opinion. Fine. I just want to answer that part. But I think they stink. I think the mainstream media are despicable. Then they have been despicable for 100 years. I do. I cultivate anger at them. Yes. That is not the same as cultivating anger at women, or at men, or at whites. It's a profession. It's actions do you not see the difference between actions and immutable characteristics like race and gender?
Well, you seem to be modifying your original position. But can I ask you one other question?
I don't know why it's not a modification at all. Go ahead.
I would ask you, do you think if someone becomes angered, as the president does and lots of people on talk radio do, over someone saying happy holidays instead of Christmas, do you think that's a policy position, or do you think it's just whining by someone who's been in politics?
I think it's a policy position, and I'm a Jew saying that. Back in the
I'm a Christian, a patriotic American, and a free market, shrink the government conservative, who also happens to be gay. What I mean by that is, my values define me, while my sexual orientation sometimes feels more like, well, a footnote. Literally, in fact. I came out as gay in a footnote in my book, End of Discussion. When it comes to my political beliefs, my orientation is only one part of the story. It's not the totality of who I am. Some unimaginative leftists like to claim that this qualifies me as a self-hating gay person. This is so boring. That intellectual laziness only underscores my point. Far too often, people are sorted by their gender, or their skin color, or their sexual orientation, or any other immutable characteristic that has nothing to do with ideas or values. To be candid, in my day-to-day life and work, I spend a lot more time thinking and writing about the failures of Obamacare, for example, than I do about LGBT issues, whatever that term might mean on any given day. Just like any conservative, I want taxes low, the military strong, and don't even get me started on single-payer health care or late-term abortion. I'm a conservative because when I think about these issues critically, I usually end up on the right end of the spectrum. It's that simple. Here's the thing. I fully recognize how fortunate I am to live in a time and a country where I can be openly gay and live a normal life. And that's in large part thanks to the hard work of gay rights activists who've paved the way for people like me, people who had it much harder than I do, and people who likely wouldn't share my politics. I am genuinely grateful to them. But it's a new era now. Why ostracize members of our community who don't toe the left-wing political line? Exit polling shows that in the last 4 general elections, between 14 and 29% of LGBT voters pulled the lever for the GOP. That's a lot of us. Now, does that mean that we all support every element of the party's platform? Absolutely not. In fact, I know that many conservatives, including some here at PragerU, don't see eye to eye with me on all of these questions. And yet, here I am, making a PragerU video, which perfectly illustrates another really important point. Conservatives are often much more tolerant of dissenting views than those who fancy themselves the torch carriers of open-mindedness. Nope. Cross the left on a hot-button social issue, and you're out. You see, some on the left believe that they're entitled to control the thoughts or votes of certain groups of people, namely minorities and so-called victim groups. For some, it comes down to a cynical calculation. Without the overwhelming support of those groups, the Democrats would win very few elections. That's why the left lashes out so viciously at anyone who wanders off their assigned reservation. I suspect conservative women and Hispanics and African Americans know exactly what I'm talking about. The truth is, the left isn't entitled to a damn thing. To paraphrase my co-author and friend Mary Catherine Ham, we didn't get liberated in order to be told by liberal activists precisely what we're allowed to think or how we must vote. A free-thinking, free citizen of a free country is not obliged to believe anything because someone else believes he or she ought to think or ought to vote or ought to rank his or her priorities a certain way. Look, I get it. Many other gay people approach these issues and their voting criteria differently, and I respect that. That's their call, even if it's not how I choose to operate. What's the phrase again? Live and let live? Why has that been turned on its head into agree or else? Let's debate issues and stop trying to punish wrong thinking. Like I said, I'm a Christian, a patriotic American, and a free market, shrink the government conservative who happens to be gay. That's how I choose to rank my priorities. You know what that's called? It's called progress. I'm Guy Benson for Prager University. Hey, thank you for watching this video. Please help support PragerU with a tax-deductible donation.